he was taken away in his prime and walked where no other man has been. Now, he has returned.
That's right. I'm back. It's me. I'm undercover. To solve the mystery of the Undertaker, because I'm a man with no fear. I have seen the light. What was that? Hey, fellas. The lights. It's scary in here. Come on, fellas. Woo-hoo.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Not Content Podcast here on the From the Cube Podcasting Network. My name is Jerome Cuson. As always, leave a 4 or 5 star review on Spotify and Apple so that people can discover what we are doing here on this channel. You should also subscribe and like on YouTube if you have not done so already for the same reason. The first Tuesday of the month, we typically go through our Right Match series, and tonight it is fully in gear as we are going to be discussing the 30th anniversary of SummerSlam 94, which is also the 30th anniversary of the United Center opening. And we're also going to be talking about the 30th anniversary of Naked Gun 33 1/3. Now, how do these two things connect? Well, Leslie Nielson appears at SummerSlam, and he is also, of course, the star of Naked Gun 33 1/3. And somehow, former Academy Award-winning actor George Kennedy also in both. But the third co-star, well, he was not at SummerSlam because he was in a Los Angeles County prison at this point. Of course, I'm talking about Orenthal James Simpson. There's a lot of 1994 vibes going on this week. Of course, my co-host is Brian and Brian. Before you answer any questions, I need you to do your version of the SummerSlam theme.
Dun 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 dun. Bum bum ba dun 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 dun.
See, the fact that you could do that, and we did not like plan this bit. I just asked him off the cuff if he could do it, and he did it.
You know me well.
Yeah.
And it's also the same theme from 90. Yeah, 90. So the 88 and 89 have the theme of the Royal Rumble, right? And they switched it to the Rumble after that. And then they gave SummerSlam their own theme for 4 years. And then I think at 95, the new generation finally took over and they just got rid of this theme altogether. But
yeah, they did the stupid we got the Stridex blimp and all that crap.
yeah, but a little quick note on this SummerSlam, since we're going to talk about it first. This actually did more buy rates than 93, which kind of tells you that they kind of focused more on storylines than, I guess, trying to build up the next Hulk Hogan, and that actually kind of paid off in the long run for this SummerSlam in terms of like telling the stories they wanted with the Undertaker and Bret and Razor Ramon and all that stuff. So, you know, for a transitional SummerSlam, this kind of feels like it actually did more money than 93. So, want to put that out there.
I mean, here's the thing. I think people always talk about Bret Hart not being a draw. He certainly did not knock the doors down, but I would say Bret and Owen definitely resuscitated the house show business to at least be less bad, I guess, because, I mean, given the steroid trial had just ended and their business was in the shitter, I would say Bret and Owen did as good of a job as you could possibly expect at this point to kind of carry the company. And it's a shame that this was not the main event of SummerSlam 94. We're going to get into what the actual main event was very shortly. As mentioned, the 30th anniversary of the United Center. Brian, I don't believe you have never been to the United Center, I assume, right?
No, I have not. I've not yet been to Chicago. I will one day, though.
Yes, you do need to come to Chicago at some point. So, of course, the United Center is the home of the Chicago Bulls, who won 3 championships almost as soon as the building opened in 96, 97, 98. The Bulls have been a dumpster fire ever since then, pretty much. The Chicago Blackhawks have also won 3 Stanley Cups in 2010, 2013, and 2015. So we have gotten 6 championships in that very facility. It is also well known for being CM Punk's big return to AEW as well. So there is a ton of history, sports, and sports entertainment as well. So, Brian, let's talk about this show. There's a few matches that I definitely want us to focus on, and there is some matches that, well, you know. So the night before this show, Diesel and Shawn Michaels became the WWF Tag Team Champions, defeating the Head Shrinkers in Indianapolis, Indiana. They flew to New York to do Regis and Kathy Lee, and then they flew to Chicago, of course, for what happened later on in the show. But that left us with the opener, Bam Bam Bigelow and Ermenard Shyster versus the Head Shrinkers. The Fatu and Samu version, the superior version of the Head Shrinkers. I have to say, Brian, I think the Head Shrinkers just came in at a very poor time. I feel like they are a good tag team who never had any good teams to compete against. This 92 to 96 was just the drizzling shits in terms of tag teams because, the Steiner brothers were there for a cup of coffee and then they left. And, the Smoking Guns were not really a factor. And like in another world, the Smoking Guns don't get near the tag team titles. But in this case, you just have kind of a thrown together team of Bam Bam Bigelow and Ermenard Shyster. This match was just kind of there. It's not great. I think Fatu and Samu do their best, but I don't know, man. IRS it was in the WWF for like 4 years. I can't think of a good IRS match. Can you?
Not as IRS. I think he did better as just Mike Rotunda when he was teaming with Barry Windham and then Dan Spivey. Because those tag matches with like the Hart Foundation, if you go back to like Primetime Wrestling '86, there's some like hidden gems in there that he's in there with the Hart Foundation as a babyface. So I think it's just this IRS role that just really holds him back a lot, and it's unfortunate. But he's one of those iconic characters that everyone still dresses up as at wrestling shows. So it's kind of this give and take.
He's fun to dress up as, but they're like his promos are just very dry. He's just there's no there, and this match also has a terrible finish because Sika basically comes in and starts hammering away on Bam Bam Bigelow and IRS. So yeah, this was just kind of a whole big bag of nothing. And
needed the tag.
I don't understand.
And they just took it away.
It certainly would have helped.
But to me, like politics, man. Shawn Michaels and Diesel just had to play their politics. Because look, there was no actual reason that they got the tag titles. It's not like they were feuding with the Head Shrinkers or anything. It's like they just
went
in.
Say that. Well, you say that. I mean, they only held the titles until the Survivor Series, and then they forfeited them because they couldn't get along. Like they didn't get hurt. They just Shawn Michaels super kicked Diesel for a third time, and they forfeited the belts. So
yeah, I know. That's
the only good thing we got is we got the Action Zone tag match, which is pretty legendary. Diesel and Shawn versus Razor and 1-2-3 Kid. That is a great match, but like other than that, we didn't really get anything else from Diesel and Shawn Michaels.
Marty and some partner came in and take the belts from Diesel and Shawn because there's an actual story there about how the Rockers never were able to get the tag titles, right? So I don't know. That was just me thinking out loud, but it never got to that point, and they just gave up the titles.
Well, if you remember earlier in the year, Marty Jannetty and the 1-2-3 Kid had a cup of coffee with the tag titles.
I know, and because Marty can't handle himself, they didn't even bother to do a fucking week with it. They just took it off after a week. So, Marty, one of my favorite wrestlers as a kid, but just never got over the hump, man. It's unfortunate, but and then. Why do the Head Shrinkers need two managers? I don't know. But I think the Head Shrinkers were at their best when they were the SST in '89 and Crockett, or not Crockett at the time, NWA. But I still love that feud with the Road Warriors, like that stuff at the Marietta Massacre, the cage match that sets up the War Games in '89. And then the whole Samoan funeral gimmick with Jim Ross screaming when they beat up Paul Ellering. I thought that was the height of the Samoan SWAT team. And I felt like, or Fatu at least, doesn't get over as much until the Attitude Era. And then Samu kind of drifts away after this. You can tell in this match, Samu 2 is kind of like not the best of shape compared to earlier in the year. Or at least in 93.
Something about those Samoans, man, and the way they gain weight. Yeah, I mean, it's...
Yeah.
You
and it didn't look as good. Their moves were not as good and smooth as in this match either. I think this is because Samu seemed to be a little out of it. And that's after this, Samu's gone. He gets replaced by the Barbarian. So that's kind of like that Head Shrinkers history around here. Like around this is like the end of the true Head Shrinkers run. So, and of course you got
I mean they were around in '95, but they were a non-factor really. So yeah, this is kind of the beginning of the end for the Head Shrinkers as a tag team. A match that I forgot, and this is 100% on the WWF in my view. Alundra Blaze defeated Bull Nakano. It's a really good 8-minute match. Like I have to say, the crowd is actually very respectful. They don't treat it like a bathroom break. It's very good. Bull Nakano controls a lot of the match. She is a tremendous performer. Really need to go back and watch some Bull Nakano in Japan to watch her kind of in her element. But Alundra Blaze does a really good job of keeping up with her. And this is a very good match, despite the fact that Jerry Lawler's commentary is pretty offensive.
Yeah, but I would say the pop at the end for the finish was really surprising. It shows the crowd was invested in the match, and by the end of it, they popped really big. It's cool to see Alundra Blaze in this role because growing up earlier in the decade of the '90s, I saw her in WCW, and she was not in this role where she was this amazing wrestler, right? Like she was just pushed as a manager. And then looking back now, it's like, of course, because WCW didn't know what to do with her. They didn't have a women's division. They didn't know how to build a women's division around her. When it's clear, like they should have built the division around her. If the hindsight 2020. But I do remember the match with Paulie Dangerously on Clash of the Champions, which had ended in a DQ, man versus woman. A lot of controversy because I don't think Turner actually wanted man versus women on their station, and they did it anyway. And after that, Medusa was kind of gone, and Paulie Dangerously was pretty much gone after that. So that was kind of like the end of the Dangerous Alliance. But really cool to see Alundra Blaze here in this role. Like I always picture her. I always remember the picture of her and Brett holding the titles together, and I think it's like the Easter Bunny or something like that, or that might be like Macho or something. But it's a really cool like image of '94. I think that's when they go to Japan actually for the tour in the summertime. But yeah, I just really dig this match a lot. I swear I found a cage match between these two. I might be wrong, but I got to look it up again. I'm trying to find it, but I swear to God, it's where Alundra Blaze is in Japan. She comes out on a motorcycle, and it's fucking badass. So yeah, I clearly remember that entrance. I just can't remember the match or I should have just put it in my kept a link somewhere, but I got to find it. But I would recommend trying to find that. And this was a really cool. Like I love the entrance too. Like they do the old school like. Or not old school, but like the traditional flowers. I thought that was really interesting. I was like, this is probably the best presentation you're going to get from the WWF in the 90s for a women's match, even compared to the Attitude Era. And not only that, it's probably the best women's match they had in the company of all time, maybe, compared to like the Jumping Bomb Angels when they came in.
The Jumping Bomb Angels at Survivor Series '87.
That match is good too, but I do like the 2 out of 3 falls they had at the Royal Rumble, the one that was on TV.
That's good too. I would say their Survivor Series match was just because you weren't expecting it. Like they just came out of nowhere.
And if you look at the way they booked it, they went. They were the last two on their team, and they ended up surviving. And that's kind of how you push younger talent in the Survivor Series traditionally. So that kind of
tag team champions and the singles champion as well. And I mean, they were doing stuff in 1987 that the WWF still wouldn't see for another like 15 years, which is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
So Razor Ramon going for the Intercontinental title against Diesel. Diesel gets to spend a whole 24 hours as a double champion, just like he would do the next year with Shawn Michaels, except in that case, he only had the tag belts for 24 hours. Diesel loses to Razor Ramon. Razor Ramon comes out with Walter Payton. And look, Razor and Diesel worked really hard in this match because they are click buddies. They're not on that guaranteed money yet, so they're actually working hard. Watching Diesel try is always a trip because he definitely stops at a certain point. And yeah, I think this is a really good match. And I think Shawn Michaels almost carries these two, despite the fact that he's not even wrestling.
Okay, first off, Shawn Michaels stepping in front of Diesel during the entrance, always classic. That's such a Shawn Michaels cocky move to do. I love it every time, trying to steal the show, even though he's not on the show. And then, of course, Razor Ramon's gear was unbelievable on this show. It's like he's got baby blue mixed with like, I don't know, this dope-looking bluish color with like a yellow gold trim. It was, this is one of Razor Ramon's best looks, I swear to God. This and maybe like the green, but this has more detail, man. And this is one of my favorite looks. I wish they would make a figure of this because I know that WWF or WWE nowadays makes classic WWF figures based on like certain shows. This is one of them that I would actually like maybe go out of my way to get. And then it just seems like Walter Payton seemed out of place. It seemed like, yeah, he was comfortable, but he wasn't like as charismatic as maybe he should have been, considering it's like pro wrestling, but he was kind of reserved, and that was fine.
He is the complete opposite of what you want out of a pro wrestler because he is not bombastic at all. Like he's in great shape, and I love that Vince McMahon points it out. I mean, that's the thing about Walter Payton is that was kind of his reputation is just not being a muscle guy, but definitely being somebody who used weight training before a lot of other people did, and then staying in great shape even after he retired, to the point like when he started losing a lot of weight, the people were making kind of jokes about it, and then he revealed he had this liver disease, and very surprisingly died at a very young age. I mean, Walter Payton is one of those people that you expected to live until he was 90 years old because of how healthy he was and the fact that he wasn't a drug dealer. He wasn't a drug guy. He wasn't an alcohol guy. Like, you look at that 85 Bears team and you think about Steve Mongo McMichael, like that's what you think of when you think of bombastic, like pro wrestling. You think of some of the other members of that team, and even the coach Mike Ditka. Walter Payton was not that guy, so he definitely, I would pay to have watched Walter Payton hang out with the Clique because of how disgusted he would be by everything involved.
Oh my God, that behind the scenes footage would be gold. But I don't know if they picked the wrong guy, but he did get a big pop, and he's a big part of Chicago history. So I don't know if maybe they would have got Mongo, and I mean Mongo is probably willing to do it at this point. And he's going to do WrestleMania the next year. So,
I think he was in training camp with the Packers because I think.
Oh, okay, that's right. I'm thinking of like the timing too. This is late August, so they're really getting ready for the beginning of the season. So that makes sense. I just wanted more like something out of that, and then he didn't really like even punch Shawn Michaels, right? Like that was the whole buildup, and he never did it. Because I've watched this match many times, and I never recall Shawn Michaels getting his ass handed to him.
I'm sure that he didn't want to do anything necessarily physical, but I don't think they show it on camera. But Jarrett Payton definitely went in the ring with his father and Razor after
that. I saw that was a cool moment, and Razor was like making sure, like, you guys okay? You guys, what do you need? He was making sure he was taking care of him, and I could tell Razor was also guiding him too, like, follow me through this entrance, follow me here. This is where you're gonna stand. Like, you could tell Razor was taking care of the guy.
I mean, that's the thing is Scott Hall always had that reputation for being the guy who could be, who was intelligent and really thought about these things. And I don't know if he was necessarily sober at this point, but he was definitely in a lot better shape than he would be a few years later. So I would say 1994 is pretty much peak Scott Hall. You've got the WrestleMania 10 ladder match. You've got the singles match he has with Shawn Michaels on Raw a few weeks prior. You've got this match. You've also got the Action Zone tag. This is Razor Ramon at his best.
Absolutely. This is my favorite Razor year. And I already mentioned how awesome he looks in that gear. But, this is the year that, like, I mean, people associate King of the Ring 94 with, like, the Owen Hart takeover kind of thing and how, like, the 3 good matches he had. But Razor, like, had 3 good matches on his own, too. Like, despite what we think about IRS, like, every time he wrestled IRS, I would say the finishes on the match really build well, even though the middle's obviously boring because IRS is doing a rest hold. But, like, the Royal Rumble match does end really well because of the finish. And then I think he has that second match with IRS at King of the Ring, right? So he's had a history with IRS, and he's actually had some good matches with him. And then I really like the Bam Bam match. I think Bam Bam doing the job in the first round kind of showed that, like, he was not going to be in the finals compared to the year before. But I really like that matchup right off the bat because I think Bam Bam and Razor had some good chemistry. So 94 was a great year for Razor, man, for sure.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this match. I think this is probably either the second or third best match on the show. And then we kind of go all the way the other way with Lex Luger and Tatanka. How does Lex Luger continually find himself in these positions? Like, he's either choking a title match, or he's possibly selling out or turning on somebody. This is constantly the story of Lex Luger's career, and I'm very, very sure at this point that this is what led to his bad reputation, because a lot of it, I think, has to do with his booking. And look, I don't think he was ever that great in WWF. I think he was always a WCW guy. I think he always put more effort in WCW. And, I mean, I think he was at his most over when he was in WCW, especially 96 and 97 when he was fighting the NWO. Even if the matches weren't great, like, Lex Luger was definitely at his most over at that point. But here he's very middling. Like, he wrestles at WrestleMania 10. He chokes the title match. The feud with Mr. Perfect doesn't happen. He's not even on the King of the Ring pay-per-view. Like, this is just, I mean, it's bad. You look at his run for the next year, like, he loses here, gets turned on, Survivor Series he loses, Royal Rumble gets eliminated, WrestleMania he's in the opening tag, he's not even on the next 2 pay-per-views, loses a tag title match, and then he goes to WCW. So this is the story of Lex Luger's career in the WWF as basically being a huge disappointment. And once Vince McMahon did not see him as a top guy, like down the card he went. This is a really good example. This is not a great match. I've never been a huge Tatanka fan, and Tatanka as a heel is somehow even worse because he turns heel and changes absolutely nothing about himself. Like, to me, this is a guy who needed to change everything. Like, he needed to start wearing a suit and needed to get out of like the Native American gear. It's really weird.
Okay, so this match is 6 minutes, and the beatdown is 10. So that tells you everything that this
Tatanka shows more intensity in the beatdown than he does during the match.
Right, and so this is basically just an angle. It's not. I mean, they set it up as a match, obviously, but it's one giant angle. The roll up is even like half-assed. The crowd's not even convinced that even it's the finish, right? They just kind of like, what the fuck just happened? And then they heard the bell ring. It was very like, what's going on until the beatdown happened, and you realize, oh, Tatanka's the one selling out. But you can't help but think that like they got some of this idea from like WCW when they were doing that stuff, because you can't help but think that like in WCW the roles would have been switched, and Tatanka would have been Sting, and Sting would have been, like accusing, or Luger would have been accusing Sting of selling out, and of course Sting would never sell out, and then Luger would have been the one to sell out. Basically, that's usually how it goes. So this time Luger's on the other end of it, and it really doesn't build to a big like payoff, because basically what I remember, and I looked this up, they have a cage match, Tatanka and Lex Luger, but they put it on a Raw that's not even on a Monday. It was like some other, I think it was a Saturday Raw or something like that. The crowd wasn't even that big. And what they end up doing is they put it on one of those Raw Hits VHS collections, and it becomes this forgotten blow-off. And it's unfortunate because they actually had like, it wasn't, a bad match. It was a decent TV cage match. It's not nearly as good as Bret and Owen, obviously, but they did have a payoff, and I just feel people like remember the angle, but never the payoff with this. It's so weird. But and then of course Luger gets screwed over, and then there's no payoff to that. And then it would really bother me was the Survivor Series when he just loses clean to all the big heels in his team. Like, it's clear that his team was inferior, and yet the WWE played it off like both teams were equal, when clearly like the bad guy team with like King Kong Bundy and fucking Bam Bam Bigelow, you know what I mean? Compared to like the Smoking Guns on Luger's team, it was just ridiculous. But this whole angle has been, I don't know, it's memorable, and we always remember like Tatanka, but I'm willing to like maybe get a shirt one day that says Tatanka sold out or some shit like that, but it's only gonna pop a few people. But it's this is probably the height of Tatanka. Yeah, that's the height of Tatanka's fame, I think, is this whole angle right here. And then that's pretty much it. This
really
and then
like, I mean, this is a guy who was undefeated for over a year and a half, and like he never went anywhere. It's so bizarre. And I think this is like the WWF. This is like, these two are the story of the WWF in the mid '90s, because basically Tatanka starts in '92. Luger is in the WBF in '92, starts wrestling beginning in '93. And by the end of '96, both guys are well gone. And with Jim Ross taking over talent relations, things start to get a lot better, because then you start seeing Dustin Rhodes and Steve Austin and Mick Foley, like they're becoming more focal points. And some of these mid '90s guys who were not very good are gone. Speaking of mid '90s guys who are not very good, Mabel. Oh my God. The fact that Jerry Lawler calls him Barney the Dinosaur. Look, Jerry Lawler is not my favorite announcer in the world, and he gets on my nerves on this show. But that Barney the Dinosaur comment is burying Mabel 6 feet under. I know you like the start of this match. I thought it was okay. This thing falls apart very quickly, and I don't necessarily blame Jeff Jarrett.
Well, I like how they build it as rap versus country, and I never like thought of that until recently, but it made me think of rap is crap, so that was fun. But yeah, Jeff Jarrett's outfit is just god awful ugly. I don't know what color or what shade of blue that is. It's some kind of weird turquoise. It does not go with the yellow, but that's the '90s for you.
Show. I mean, I know you like the Razor gear, but there's a lot of that going around across the board.
Yeah, that blue. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but they just had this idea that we're gonna put Jeff Jarrett in this getup, and it's it's the usual Jeff Jarrett getup, but it just looks so like, especially now in HD, like the colors are not clicking at all. But so what I also want to point out is the beginning of the match with the whole rap thing and Mabel and Oscar coming out. At the time when this comes out, there's a song called "Whoop There It Is," and I know you've heard of that song. Whoop there it is, whoop there it is, and it's actually like one of the chants that the WCW Saturday Night crowd would do at this time. Like around 93, 94, they would like just randomly do it because they were bored. And then you could hear it like in the WWF when Mabel and Mo would come out. So that was, or Mabel and Oscar would come out. So that was kind of like interesting, I thought. Like this whole "whoop there it is" phenomena kind of took over the WWF crowd and the WCW crowd a little bit, and that's, I guess, is like the inspiration for Mo and Mabel a little bit. But considering they were also from Memphis as well, like that's why probably Jerry Lawler made that comment, because he probably knows Mabel a lot well, because I think they all came from that Memphis area, and you know how it is with giants in Memphis, they kind of bring them up when they're not really ready just to face Jerry Lawler and that kind of thing. So, but in this case,
Jerry knows what he's doing. I mean, Jerry Lawler can make a lot of things happen that a lot of guys just can't. I mean, he's able to sell and he's able to do his punches, and that's really what you need to do in order to be successful. I can't believe one of these men main evented the SummerSlam the next year. Can't believe it.
yeah, I know, right? And the one that lost too in embarrassing fashion. But I would say that
Mabel might be one of the worst matches I've ever seen. It's so bad.
yeah, it's bad. But I think in this case, Jeff Jarrett like probably learned from Jerry Lawler and how to work with big guys, right? Because it's not just this match. Like there's that match with the Giant that people talk about a little bit to this day, like one of the more athletic Giant matches in WCW, right? That match with him and Jarrett at Halloween Havoc. And then Jarrett would work with big guys later on. So he's working with Saddam Singh now, and not necessarily against each other, but he's helping that dude like progress really well. And I think him, Saddam Singh, and as a tag team champion in AAA with what's his name, the guy that got fired, former WWE champion.
I'm not sure who you're referencing.
From three-man band, the Indian guy.
Jinder Mahal.
Jinder Mahal. So Jinder Mahal and Saddam Singh are like the AAA tag champions right now, or some shit like that. All because of Jeff Jarrett and the way that Jeff Jarrett kind of brought Saddam to Mexico and kind of brought him up. So Jarrett and Giants go together, and I think this actually like makes kind of sense in the beginning, but then the end kind of falls apart. But still, like this is clear, like Jarrett is getting a push after this, and he does. And I think this is the match that kind of probably convinced Vince to do it.
Champion at the beginning of '95.
Exactly. I think this is the match that probably said to Vince, like, hey, maybe he can just carry the title a little bit, get Razor a little bit of a rest from carrying the title.
Well, I mean, Kerry Jarrett was supposedly going to come in and take over at some point. So I don't know if he's in the soup at this point because of Vince McMahon being acquitted, but Kerry Jarrett was almost going to take over. And that's one of the reasons that Jeff Jarrett even ended up in the WWF. And I'm sure him getting the Intercontinental title was kind of was some sort of a reward or some sort of shout out for loyalty of some sort. But I mean, look, I think Jeff Jarrett has had a profoundly bizarre career because he's basically been a heel in terms of national wrestling for his entire career up until this most recent AEW run. And it really feels like we blew it. It feels like we as a wrestling community blew Jeff Jarrett in terms of not allowing him to be a great Southern babyface. And it just feels like it's a shame that we missed out on that because he can clearly do it. And right now, here in 2024, he is a better babyface than probably 75% of the babyfaces out there.
And I've been, screaming his praises for the last 3 years now. Never a Jeff Jarrett fan until this podcast came out and I saw this different side of him. And to be honest, I really like the Jeff Jarrett side where it's the business mindset. And he talks about the business and how profitability and ROI, return on investment. And I'm really like akin to those kind of things. Is like, as a person who does side hustles and stuff like that, you're always looking at the ROI. And when I heard him finally like say that out loud, I was like, okay, he's not. I'm just not the only one, I guess, who thinks about these kind of things. Jeff Jarrett clearly does, and he gets that from his grandmother and his dad, both promoters. So he's got that history with him. And yeah, I think that, even Dave Meltzer called his promo, the Owen promo that he just recently cut this summer, as one of the all-time greatest promos ever by anybody. I think that's a lot. That's a lot.
Incredible.
Yeah, considering that Jeff Jarrett doesn't even like Dave Meltzer for the whole rating system and stuff like that. But for a guy that seems to have not been a Jarrett fan all in his writings, like Dave Meltzer, and then put him over like that, says a lot about growth. So I think you're right. We missed out on a lot of this babyface run, and you can tell like we missed something when he goes to WCW. The first night he goes there, he cuts this promo about tradition, right, about his family, and then he just ignores it and completely goes away from the
And he's
NWO.
still wearing the same stupid gear.
Yeah, the white gear, and he never changed it. It's typical WCW. But we saw shades of it that night because he talked about Hogan. He said like to Hogan, like, you wouldn't be where you were if it wasn't for my dad or something like that. So there was little, seeds planted there, but they just never went with it and just went with him as a heel. And it's kind of unfortunate, and that kind of led to his TNA run where everyone thinks he's this guy that just protected his own interest or whatever, which is kind of true, but it's like, for example, like Monty Brown, if he gave the title to Monty Brown, right, the TNA title, there was a strong risk that Monty Brown would have just left the WWF immediately or WWE immediately because WWE would have been on his radar. They would have signed him for more money, that kind of thing. So it's more than just Jeff Jarrett trying to put himself over in TNA.
Yeah, but I mean that was a huge opportunity that they missed out on. And Monty Brown is one of the great is a great what if story because obviously he left because of family concerns. He was in the WWE for a hot minute, and then he left, and it's a really weird situation. We don't have time to legislate that part of it, but Jeff Jarrett was very interesting on this night, and of course would continue to play a role in national wrestling for the next 30 years, even until this day. Up next, we had the cage match between Brett and Owen. I think this is one of the best matches that the WWE has ever had. I think this is one of the best feuds in the history of the WWE. This was spectacular. The Blue Bar cage matches have a very negative reputation for a good reason because it generally means no blood and it means Hulk Hogan kind of stomping around. But here you have two really athletic guys, so they're able to use the cage in ways that so many others are not. They're able to kind of do not a high flying style, but they are able to incorporate the climbing part of the cage so well. And it's really impressive to me that they're able to do this. But I really love, because they have to take the time to build the cage, you get like this extended video package of just looking at the history, looking at what's happened, and just the story that they're telling, like consistently, and like the ups and the downs and the ways that, Brett and Owen, Owen was really mad at Brett, but then they patched it up, but then Brett was quote unquote selfish. Owen upsets Brett at WrestleMania, but then Brett wins the WWF title. Jim Neidhart returns to be in Brett's corner, gets Brett disqualified, but then helps Owen win. And just the way this all played out, this is one of the best feuds that I think they've ever had. And this is also one of Brett's better babyface promos, if not his best. He gets a lot of justified praise for what he did in '97. And Brett was always a very awkward promo, especially when he starts cutting more promos, like when he first wins the title in '92. Like, he is not comfortable, but he is a lot better in '94 than he is in '92. And what he says to Owen, I think, is really powerful. And just the way that they incorporate the family in there, that's something that I think really worked out. But I mean, man, this cage match was so good. And then, we've talked about like the NWA feel, the WCW feel. Like after the match, it's a heel beatdown. Like Jim Neidhart comes in the ring, the other Harts are trying to come in. Neidhart and Owen are keeping him out, and they do a beatdown of Brett, and that is very WCW. Like, this is not Bret Hart posing for the fans at the end of the show. I mean, this is definitely something where they're trying to keep this going a little bit for the house show circuit. And I know that they had like one last match on the Action Zone too.
Yeah, this is a great match. It's fantastic, 5-star classic. You talk about the ways they incorporated the cage. Like it seems like they were just building and building, and then there would be this tremendous bump, and then build and build and build, tremendous bump, build and build and build, tremendous bump. And that's the story of this match. It's just so many great, like, incredible moments. Stiff pile drivers, the superplex from the top of the cage, everyone hanging all over the place. It's just a really athletic cage match for sure. It doesn't have like the blood and the guts, but it's this different type of cage match for sure. I just wish they put it on the end, because whenever you do a blue cage match, there's always the issue of the setup and the takedown, especially if you have it in the middle of the show. So that's what the issue was here in terms of the timing, because they were clearly like stalling for time to have it set up and doing all the interviews with the family and stuff, which is fine. Like it kind of fit, but then I don't know. By the time the cage match started, there's kind of this lull until it starts getting going. I just felt like the placement was a little off. I think it should have gone last, especially with the Undertaker doing his thing. I think you should have opened with Undertaker versus Undertaker, to be honest, and get that out of the way, and then just build to the main event. Um, but that's kind of how I would have done it instead of back to back. Because doing it back to back, there's like these lulls and like these downtimes in between with the cage and stuff. And then you got to do the package videos for the Undertaker and more Leslie Nielson stuff. So I just wish it was on the end. But still, this match is tremendous, like tremendously put together, and you can tell they put a lot of thought into it. And it's not your traditional, even WWF style cage match. Like I said, it's all like very athletic, almost like this kind of reminds me of like when the Hardys and Edge and Christian started doing ladder matches, and kind of this more athletic version of the ladder match as opposed to the traditional style we were used to with like HBK and Razor Ramon. And this is kind of the evolution of the cage match, it feels like, to the modern era, because we're like, by this point, like, you're so used to the heel getting beat down to the point where they can't get up anymore, kind of thing. In this case, they did the really athletic ending where Owen's just hanging there, and by hook or crook, like, he almost won the title, you know what I'm saying, by like inches. But Brett was the one able to get away at the end and drop his feet. So this is a really good storytelling, and then of course the beatdown at the end is very Horseman-esque. I don't know if they should have just put Jim Neidhart in the corner of Owen and put British Bulldog in the corner. But at the same time, you don't get the incredible Diana bump. That was incredible. I couldn't believe she took it. Do you know what I'm talking about? They clothesline Bulldog and she goes.
Oh yeah, I mean she definitely wanted her moment in the spotlight too. Yeah, it's a really good moment. But I mean, the thing about it is that I think they wanted to keep them in the background because that set up a series of tag matches. So basically, on Raw a few weeks later, you definitely got Owen Hart and Jim Neidhart versus the Bulldog and Brett on Raw. So they're clearly wanting to get them involved as well, and then that would evolve into Owen being in the corner for Bob Backlund at the Survivor Series, and the feud would kind of march on for another couple of years until they patched things up when Bret Hart reformed the Hart Foundation. So this is definitely a long-term storyline that also had a lot of its ups and downs and its peaks and valleys, and they went away from it, and then they would come back to it. So it's a really good match. This is a classic WWF title match. This is probably one of the best cage matches, if not the best, like pure steel cage. Not talking Hell in a Cell, but pure steel cage matches they've ever had.
I would say number 2 is Boss Man Hogan, and I would argue that that's not even the one that I'm talking about on Saturday Night's Main Event. I'm talking about the one at fucking MSG that people hardly know about. So there's some really good blue bar cage matches out there. Just got to go out and find them, because not all of them were on like TV. A lot of them were like house shows, like MSG and whatnot, or Boston or something like that, and they would put them on either TV once or something like that. But there's some really good stuff out there in the blue bars for sure. And on to the Undertaker versus Undertaker. And I just want to point out really quick, A, $1 Million Man all over the show in terms of the angles and storylines. B, what is up with the $1 Million Man and trying to like find like a double of someone? He did the double gimmick with Hogan and Earl Hebner with Dave Hebner, and it cost Hogan the title. And now we got a double of the Undertaker. So I don't know. It's just something about $1 Million Man thinking he could just buy his way into taking over people's lives or something like that. It's just hilarious to me. But yeah, I wish that Brian Lee was 6 months. Yeah, as long as I just wish Brian Lee was like 6 months or 6 inches taller for this to work even better. Because once you realize it, it's just the mist. It's dead from there. Once you see that they're not even the same height.
The fact that Brian Lee is so much shorter than Mark Calloway, I mean, the match is dead. Like, the crowd is silent for most of it. Like, there's definitely reactions to Purple Undertaker's entrance. And I don't know if you noticed this, but the Faker, the Underfaker, when he comes out to the Undertaker's old theme. And when he comes out, when the actual Undertaker comes out, it's the new theme that he basically has from 94 until 97. I assume you noticed that?
Oh, of course. And that's the first time we see purple. The Purple Undertaker is like the first time
the worst version of the Undertaker, by the way. The worst version, because
he improved it with the mask. I like the mask version of this with the purple and the mask. Like
95. Look at the Undertaker's 1995. It's IRS, it's King Kong Bundy, and it's Kama, and it's Mabel.
Oh
Just
yeah.
an awful
No,
year.
it's
Just an
it's
awful
awful.
year.
But that's what from what I've heard, like the worse the match, the longer the entrance, right? So listen, fake Undertaker gets an entrance. Paul Bear gets an entrance with the Druids and the coffin, so that's
No,
another 5 minutes.
DiBiase. You forget DiBiase got an entrance.
So DiBiase also
Undertaker,
gets an entrance, and then
Paul
we get
Bearer
the
gets an
actual
entrance, and then
entrance.
the
So this
Undertaker.
is like 20 minutes of entrances for a 9-minute match. Yeah, that's the Undertaker's gimmick, is that if he knows he's going to a bad match, he's going to take as long
And
as
this
possible
is bad.
entrance.
This is really, really bad because there's no flow whatsoever because like you have two people like no selling, so it's very ineffective and it's. I mean, I'm stunned they didn't go home like 3 minutes sooner because just it wasn't working. I would have paid to hear what Vince McMahon was actually thinking, because he's on commentary, so he has to be on his best behavior. And he's like saying the crowd is in awe. This crowd was not in awe. They wanted to be done. I mean, when you have a hot angle before this and you have one of the best cage matches of all time, that certainly did not help this match. But this is what you literally went from one of the best matches in the company's history to one of the worst.
Yeah, this is kind of what the Kane angle ended up becoming. I think they would just kind of rehash that into the Kane thing, because I could picture in Vince McMahon's mind, like that's probably what he was thinking, like something like a Kane or someone like a Kane to come in for the Undertaker to foil, doing the same moves and being supernatural and stuff. So
I cannot believe
that's
Kane
my
lasted
thinking.
as long as he did.
Because like, look at Star Wars logic, okay? New Hope, blew up the Death Star. Return of the Jedi. What are we gonna do? Rebuild the Death Star. So in this case, fake Undertaker gone. What do? We need another foil for the Undertaker. Oh, let's do the fake Undertaker gimmick again. Except we'll just call him his brother. Boom. There you go.
Yeah, I don't know, man. So that is SummerSlam '94. It is a very fascinating show to watch in hindsight, but it's got its rough moments, but definitely tugs on your nostalgia for sure. Any final thoughts on SummerSlam before we move? Actually, this is one of the longest conversations that we've had about wrestling in quite some time, and that is because we are reviewing a whole show as opposed to a match. But I don't think either one of us are going to have a lot to say about Naked Gun 33 and a third, so we'll make up for it in the back end here.
Final thoughts. I think this is one of the more memorable shows as a kid if you grew up in the era because of the storylines going in. Like, we know Undertaker versus Undertaker is bad, but to this day, it's like we talk about it a lot, making fun of it. So I guess it is memorable. And then, me and my buddies always make fun of Tatanka and Lex Luger kind of thing because, I don't know, just that angle. It's like you always remember that Tatanka sold out and was never Lex Luger. And to this day, I think Tatanka should have joined the Nation of Domination, because then you could say that Tatanka joined the Nation, wink, wink. But for the Nation of Domination in '97, that would have worked because I'm talking about the version where it was like the mixed races, like a whole different variety of people before they split up. And that would have been interesting because then you would have a Native American representative, a black representative, a white representative, and a Puerto Rican representative all in a single group. I thought that would have been incredible. But yeah, this is a fun show to watch in hindsight. Just, some stuff to skip over. I would probably skip the tag match actually in the beginning and just kind of start the show with Alondra Blaze and Bull Nakano, and then you're pretty much set from there. Maybe just skip the Jeff Jarrett match, and then you get 5 matches with like good storylines. So that's kind of my final thoughts on the show.
All right, let's talk about this movie, Naked Gun 33 and a third, the third in the franchise, coming off of a failed television show. So there is a TV show. Brian, I assume you have seen the 6 episodes of Police Squad that aired in 1982.
I haven't yet, but it's been on my back burner only because I get like it sounds like 6 episodes is not a lot, obviously, but it just seems so like, oh man, I'm gonna get so into it, and then it's gonna be over really quick. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, the
hate
episodes
like
stand
that.
on their own, so this isn't like a show that's going to have a huge cliffhanger. I mean, the 6 episodes very much stand on their own, and they're pretty hilarious, and it is well worth going out of your way to see. This is a movie that starts out with an Untouchables kind of spoof. It kind of peaks there, and I think this movie is definitely. This is a very sweaty comedy. I think it definitely has its moments, but you definitely feel like, okay, we need to take a break from this franchise. We need to maybe have Leslie Nielson do something else.
So The beginning is like fun, and I read that they were going to do it originally in the first movie, obviously because Untouchables came out in '87, the first movie came out in '88, but they just didn't have the budget for it, and I guess they had extra money lying around, so they decided to shoot it for this movie, even though it has nothing to do with the actual plot. Um, and the thing about the beginning of Naked Gun 1 and 2 is, like, obviously the opening credits are the car driving, you see the car from the perspective. But by the third movie, it just feels played out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wish they would have done something different. And they did do something a little different by the end of the sequence. But I don't know. Maybe they should have made it animated or something like that, because it just felt like we're doing more of the same. Obviously, it's the third movie, but it's just not nearly as funny as the first time around. So the opening of this movie is kind of a downer for me, because it just doesn't open up with the right punch and kick that the first two movies open with. And then it kind of gets better after that, but it doesn't open up with the right punch that the first two movies do.
Yeah, I mean the fact that it's a dream sequence also I think is part of the reason that it doesn't feel like it has the payoff. But I mean, you look at this movie; it's such an interesting capstone of 1994 because, of course, this is O.J. Simpson's last movie. O.J. Simpson no longer with us, and like literally months after this movie came out, he would be arrested for murder and would go on trial in one of the most important trials probably in the country's history, just in terms of what it said about race and culture. And it's so fascinating to me that you ended up in this situation where you have an actor that is basically a murderer, and he's like associated with this franchise. It's so weird to me. And you also have Anna Nicole Smith, who her life is kind of a tragedy in its own rights, and certainly I think the way the media treated her was pretty repulsive, and even the way that she gets treated in this movie. I mean, she is basically a sex object in this movie. I think her performance is just kind of fine, but she doesn't get anything to do. Like, she's basically there to be an object for of desire for Fred Ward and Leslie Nielson's characters, and that's really really unfortunate. I would say. I think Priscilla Presley and Leslie Nielsen have very good chemistry together. You don't really get a lot of those two, but I think when they come back together in like the last half hour of the movie, I think it definitely picks up. I think the best moments for those two characters, quite honestly, are when they are together and not separated, and when we're not doing like Thelma and Louise with the Priscilla Presley character. But yeah, I think that there's so it definitely has its moments, but you could just tell that things are they're running out of steam from the opening. The opening credits also don't seem as creative as the first two. They're still kind of making references to baseball, and they have Leslie Nielsen, who looks like Phil Donahue at the end. Like they beat that joke into the ground. So yeah, it's a very sweaty movie, and it doesn't necessarily work. But I will say that I definitely got a nice chortle out of the fact that there were constant references to Phil Donahue. Shannon Doherty has a cameo in this movie. James Earl Jones has a cameo in this movie. You have Earl Bowen as a psychologist. He was a psychologist in the three Terminator movies. So a lot of other references to other movies as well.
Yeah, a lot of weird things going for this movie. This is our fourth James Earl Jones movie we decided to review this year, and we've actually had to review none of his movies before up until this year. I don't know how that happened, but another weird thing. But I would say that the weird thing to me about this movie is that it comes out in March, right? Shawshank Redemption comes out later in the year, but somehow they're knowledgeable enough to do the escape plot, which is basically escape from Alcatraz. But somehow it's in the same year that Shawshank Redemption has this amazing ending of an escape plot. So it's almost as if they kind of planted the seeds for Shawshank Redemption towards the end of the year, but they were just really making fun of Escape from Alcatraz. So I thought that was really interesting in the timing of that, because I think the two parts of the movie that I really enjoyed that compared to like the rest of the movie is obviously like when they're in jail and they're doing the escape bit, and then the Oscars. Like, those are the two things that I really like about this movie, and they're very like it's only like 40 minutes of the movie combined for those two sequences. So it's kind of unfortunate that the rest of the movie just doesn't carry it. Like, even number two, I think carries its own up until like, yeah, probably the whole thing. I think it carries its own. Like, it's funny, and it has you engaged. This one doesn't have you engaged until like Leslie Nielsen's in the jail, I think. And the other thing too is I don't know if this was coincidental or not, but it just seems like they used the exterior of the jail scene. I think they used it from the jail from Batman 66. I swear to God, because in Batman 66, in the first episode, they go to the jail in Gotham, and then Joker breaks out. But the external shot just looks so exact. I know maybe just jails and prisons look exactly exterior-wise like the same, but it just felt like, oh, is this where in Batman 66 all of a sudden? Because that would have fit in police in the Police Squad movie. So I don't know if that was like intentional or not, but I was just thinking like, okay, this is the Batman 66 exterior shot right here, which kind of fits the tone. But yeah, just a lot of weirdness about this movie. Fred Ward, like I mentioned last week, I think he's probably the best actor in this movie. Despite him, like, I don't know, his tone is just weird. Like, he knows he's in a bad movie, but he's hamming it up, obviously chewing scenery. So it was really fun to see him do that, because I've seen him in the Trimmers movies. He's really entertaining. I think he's underrated. I think something like this, like with something with like a shitty script, he can just kind of pull something out of it, and I think he did. And I like all the cameos too, like Weird Al, and then Vanna White, Olympia Dukakis, just random stuff like that. And then just making fun of the Oscars themselves. That part I liked. Everything else was kind of like, sex joke here, sperm bank joke here.
Some homophobic stuff, prison
homophobic
rape
stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little of some light racism. I mean, just a lot of the tropes that we've come to expect, and it just feels very like. I mean, you've seen this stuff before in like Airplane and Naked Gun, and even the second Naked Gun. Like when they hit Staying Alive and they went back to the '70s, I was like, we're really doing this. This is exactly what Airplane did. And again, it just feels like reheated leftovers in so many ways. But again, I don't think it's terrible. Like I would say, I give this like a 5.5 out of 5. It's definitely the least of the three Naked Guns, but I mean, there was still enough laughs to where I wasn't like bored. And the good news is this movie is also only 83 minutes, which is very helpful for this movie. I think if it was any longer, I think you would be really feeling just how long it is.
Yeah, and I think that also is like a telling kind of thing. Anytime you have a movie that's 80 minutes, it's like it's either a comedy that's it's like a cult classic that didn't have enough money to fully have a 90-minute movie, or it's a big budget like production movie that they're just trying to get out of theaters quick because they know that anything longer would have been even more terrible. So it's just one of those things. When I saw the running time, I was like, oh, this is definitely a sequel to Naked Gun. 83 minutes, but it grossed money. What can we say? Like a $30 million budget worldwide, it grossed 132. What can you say? It made a profit, and that's kind of the way this franchise ends. But Leslie Nielsen continues to do these spoofs throughout the 90s that are very questionable. I've seen a few, and they're really bad. Like I feel like this was like the peak of spoof Leslie Nielsen.
I mean, he's also in like Scary Movie 3 and Scary Movie 4. It's rough.
I don't like those scary movies at all. I just like 1 and 2. And I even saw the Leslie Nielsen one in theaters, hoping like I can kind of tell like it was different. And then I read afterward that it was David Zucker's team that took over from the Wayans, and you can tell like the humor kind of switched a little bit in terms of like the style of humor and stuff. But I was never a fan of Leslie Nielsen like the late 90s, Wrongfully Accused, that kind of thing. It just didn't click well.
I mean, he was definitely
this is his peak, I think, in terms of spoof.
He was definitely leaning into the character a bit too much, I would say, and just that persona. Like it was like I think it was fun. It was really good in Airplane because he was just playing it straight, and then it turned into more and more of a cartoon, and I think that's ultimately where we landed. And it's unfortunate because he was Mr. Magoo. Yep,
call him a cartoon, and he played
not
Magoo.
Great. Yeah, that was not a very well-reviewed movie at all, really. So that is Naked Gun 33 and the 30th anniversary of an okay movie. Again, not terrible, but also not the best in the franchise. But we felt what better way to pair up SummerSlam 94 with this movie. Brian.
Walter Hill's the director we've been talking about. His name has been coming up in other things, and I've been wanting to watch Streets of Fire forever. I downloaded it on my computer like 15 years ago, and I never watched it, but I love the soundtrack. And it's also got Rick Moranis, Diane Lane, and just the soundtrack is bomb. So I'm really excited to finally watch it. There's this one song in the movie that is this incredible 80s song that sounds like it was gonna like by I don't know, it could have been a bigger hit, but the guy who sang it wasn't like a big artist at the time, so it's just kind of I think it's like a cult classic at this point. I can Dan Hartman, I Can Dream About You. We'll talk about that song when we review the movie, but Walter Hill, man, I'm looking forward to that movie. And the other movie part of the double feature you wanted to review?
So we are going to be reviewing Warriors and Streets of Fire. It is going to be a very exciting 2 weeks before we hit our 8th inning or 7th inning, I guess, and it's going to be fun. I'm very much looking forward to. I haven't watched the Warriors in a long time, but I remember really liking it. And Streets of Fire is one of those movies that's been on my list of movies to watch forever. And we are going to be celebrating the 45th and 40th anniversaries of those two movies, so that'll be really fun.
And when it comes to the Warriors, I highly recommend finding the director's cut, which I think is on the Blu-ray, but it gives you more of like a background of what's going on and kind of sets you up for the movie a little bit more better than the original version did. So I highly recommend checking that out as well.
All right, so for Brian, I am Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.